Okay, so I've made the decision to go ahead and concrete everything I've worked on and grab my micron pen here. That is 05. I could have worked smaller, but for me, because it's a crest and it's going to be in the background, it's just going to be a solid image. It doesn't need to be too dainty of a line. It can be a rather thick line. I didn't go as far as getting a 0.8. 0.5 should suffice just fine. I figure as you start dragging the tip across the paper, you'll feel it start to fight you. You'll feel it start to jump a little bit. So the bigger the head, the more resistance you end up getting because the more surface it's dragging on the paper. And then, vice versa. The smaller tip you have, the more it's like dragging a needle on the surface if you try pushing the tip across the paper instead of dragging it. So, I mean, you just have to kind of pick your tools according to what you're trying to get. So I'm not trying to get too thick and too heavy of a line. I'm still trying to get it's kind of a medium thickness. So 0.5 or 0.3 would have sufficed, but I chose 0.5. Couldn't find my 0.3. Now, one of the things I was starting to consider while I'm sitting here inking all this is I'm feeling the nib of the actual pen do that little bit of jitter as I'm trying to make these little short strokes across the paper. And I'm obviously realizing that when it comes to getting this done as a tattoo, the tattoo artist is going to have a hell of a lot, more work on their hands than me. Because here I am just sitting on a stationary desk with a stationary pen, just dragging it across an angled surface. Whereas with a tattoo artist, they've got basically this electronic machine vibrating in their hand that they'll have to deal with while trying to do these same smooth, curvy lines. So that's another reason why when I was grabbing an ink size, I'm thinking, well, even if it goes a little bit thick, I'm okay with that. Because the tattoo artist is probably going to have to double over these each and every single one of these lines multiple times to at least get them thick so they'll show up. So in that same thought, I'm not trying to make it too complicated. I'm not trying to make the knot work too tight, but I am trying to prevent the stereotypical like crosshatch board. It looks like you cut open a weave basket. Some Celtic knots that people do just tends to look like cross stitching or some pattern of weaving, where it's just straight lines going one way, straight lines going the other way, and then they just vary which one's on top and bottom, and they just kind of go in and out. Whereas me, as I said before, I was including that specific design element of the horseshoe shape multiple times, and it just sort of set the tone for how loopy and how swirly I was going to be making the knot work. Plus, considering I made the knots at the top look like feathers, if I made the knots at the bottom look too straight line, then it's going to completely clash. So this at least ties in the same design elements from top to bottom, even though on bottom they're going to be a lot more compact, and at the top they sort of fan out and become a bit more thin. And I want that idea, that sort of lofting, thinner, freedom. I just wanted that whole feeling coming from it. So by now I've already made a couple of conscious decisions to change which ribbons are going higher, which ones are overlapping where, pushing some to the back, pulling some to the front, just to mix it up a bit. That way it's more difficult to distinguish which layer of ribbon I've actually drawn first and then which one's on top or bottom consistently because it changes. So I made one mistake right here. I realized I'd gotten this far already inking and the image was still behind it of the actual figure. So I went ahead and just pulled that out there real quick just so I wouldn't leak any ink through the paper and possibly smudge it because I hadn't scanned it in yet while I was still recording this. Now, coming up here right at the top, I made one decision, and just while I was loosely sketching it, but I didn't realize by making that decision, I kind of threw away the tradition that it's all just one giant knot. I already made that mistake at the bottom by kind of drawing in a separate knot that just sort of fills in the spaces, but what I could have done right here is instead of closing it off and making that the separate bottom part of the crest, I could have done a couple of little different loops and swirls and actually connect it to the wing parts. But as you can see right here, I've already inked it. I could easily go over with whiteout right now if I wanted to add a few loops or two and then reconnect it. So I'm actually going to go back and do that. So the final version will actually have the wings connected to the crest at the bottom. It won't be separated like on this video. I'd say in all honesty, I haven't ever really done any Celtic knotwork for that matter, or filigree like this. And I would say if there was anything that was really a driving force to kind of get me doodling stuff like this, to really start picking it up, it was probably just from watching the Lord of the Rings special features for the movies. Now, if anyone's seen those movies and seen the special features from the extended versions, they really go into showing a lot of the concept designs and stuff that were done by John Howe, or I think it's John Howe, or either way, the concepts artists who did the work for the movie, they really filled a lot of space with beautiful, articulated, not design work for the elves, and they changed up the style for the sake of the dwarves. The dwarves are a bit more geometric. The very straight lines like I referred to before that almost looks like cross-hatching or thatch work for like a wicker basket. That type of thatch work is like the type of stuff they used when doing like dwarven style. But anyway, they changed it up, and I mean they really added it to everything. I mean they made very long, leafy looking stuff for like the hilt of Frodo's sword and a lot of different stuff like that. I mean they really put a strong design element in there, and it made me realize you sat down and you watched them sketching just sitting on the hillside, and they're very quick sketch artists. They're very fine detailed concept artist, and I've spent too much time myself trying to redefine, well, what am I? Am I a comic book artist? Am I a designer? Am I an interior designer? Am I a clothing designer? Am I a character concept artist? So I've kind of taken it back a little bit and realized I should start really dipping my fingers in a lot of different stuff, really looking into Celtic knotwork, really looking into tattoo design, tattoo art, to see how other people do flame, see how other people do crests or shields, or Ray-Bans of light coming out of clouds and stuff like that. Little things that just take a picture up a notch by adding that much more environment to it, just because they add that much more mood. So here I was very confident with knowing I could probably swoop through these feathers fairly easily. So I saved them for last. That's why I focused so much on doing the bottom. I threw these on there kind of lightly and real quick and then just moved right past them. As I said, I was very confident, feeling it would be really easy to throw on, when I'm all done. Just sort of like my way of ending on a high note. As you can tell, as I'm even drawing these lines here, there's still a bit of jitteriness with the pen. And one of the secrets I've found with inking, which I'm actually not doing right now, is usually I work very fast. If I'm putting ink on the paper, I usually just kind of, sling it on there real quick. If it's a long line, I kind of sling it across there real quick, and that helps keep a very smooth motion, because from point A to point B, your hand just follows its own arc. It doesn't take time to be jittered and bumped around by the surface of the table behind the paper or by the friction between the nib and the paper. So when you just kind of zip your hand across the paper, you get a lot smoother line. The danger of that, though, comes when all of a sudden, like the lines I'm drawing right now, maybe a ½ inch too long or a ½ inch too long. The other problem is you end up getting a very gradual release off of the paper, so your line tends to go a bit of a grayscale until it's very, very light at the end of your brush stroke. So as you strike outwards towards the tip of the feather, right at the very tip of the feather, you might end up having it very opaque. You can almost kind of see through it. If you were to erase the pencil line, the black would actually fade to white because the brush was slowly lifting up. So I'm moving slow, and I'm getting a bit of that jittery effect because I know deep down, no matter how exact I get this, a tattoo artist still has the responsibility to make it smooth. So I'm not really stressing myself out to make it too exactly smooth. I'm trying to stress myself out about the exact nature of it, its exact dimensions, and making sure it's thick enough that a tattoo artist can see it. So here it is finished, and I'm looking at it now as making sure I haven't left out any parts, making sure I haven't left pencil somewhere. So I take out my eraser and I just start doing very light erasing first just to make sure, because at this stage in the game, if you erase too heavy too quickly, you can start pulling some of the ink up depending on what type of ink pen you used or what sort of nib that you used. And once again, back to that brush stroke thing, if you just kind of just lifted up the pen on your strong or fast stroke, and you start erasing too heavily right afterwards, you'll actually pull up some of that ink because it hasn't really soaked in. It's still kind of sitting on the surface. So I'm using this right now to get rid of some of the more fine overlapping lines. And then in a minute here, I'm going to go over it with my big A-bomb white eraser and just kind of just nuke the surface of the pencil. There you go. Come out with the big guns. It's just long strokes and just trying to get rid of all the excess lead lines that I don't need. I found years ago the secret to erasing is using your other hand. It's how you position your other hand and then erasing within your fingers and your thumb. Erase within that area where you're stretching the paper almost like a canvas. You're stretching it tight. If you go outside of that, you end up grabbing paper where there's nothing else holding it down, and before you know it, your eraser pulls the paper and you've wrinkled the hell out of your picture. or you end up erasing too far, you catch the edge of the paper and actually pull the edge back, and you'll sometimes tear it, or just crease it right across. Every time you scan it, no matter what you try, you'll always get that shadow. So I'm very careful now whenever I do just mass erasing. Okay, so that's the right side of the crest. And as I said, I've already updated and changed it so that the wings do actually connect to the crest at the bottom, so it is actually all one solid knot, except for the secondary knot that just sort of fills in the space at the bottom to make it thicker. But all the way from right side to left side, it will conjoin in the very middle and at the bottom, and it'll go all the way from left side to right side, all the way up to the tip of the wing and all the way back down. So thank you again for joining me once again. I am Nicholas Fights at Lead-Based Studios here. Feel free to stick around to see where all these video posts might go, what video might come next, and leave a comment and a suggestion for what you want to see sketched or drawn next. Or if you have any questions on the how-to aspect of it, something specific, then maybe I'll post up a video and answer it.